Okay, so I found this wonderful quote from Uncle Ernie, as Dolores always says. There is a light and a life at the center of all things, and a consciousness that responds. This imprisoned splendor, to the eyes that perceive it, bursts like the glory of a new dawn. That's in all things, and that includes us. But we don't seem to live from that place a lot of the time. I think we do when we come here because we're kind of reminded, right. Hey, you are the light. There's an inner splendor in you. Let's see it shine. And everything we said this evening was leading up to this idea. It was amazing to me. I thought everything we say every week, and yet tonight it really went zing, zing with this whole thing. Yeah. So back in the 80s, there was, he had been a medical doctor and then he became a spiritual doctor, healer type person. His name was Brew Joy. Anybody ever heard of him? Yes. His book that I read at that time was called Joy's Way. I still have it, but it is literally falling apart at the seams. And he talks in there about a woman's experience. She was very much like any of us in this room. She called herself an ordinary housewife, whatever that means. But she certainly wasn't into new agey anything. And she was walking along the beach in California. And all of a sudden, everywhere she walked, she saw light shooting out of the sand. Mm-hmm. And it kind of unnerved her. And then she saw the light coming up through her feet and her lower legs. And then she sees the light in the ocean, the waves that are crashing on the shore. The light is just spilling out and the sand is glowing. And then out of nowhere, this booming voice, I think of this almost like the burning bush, right? It may have been what happened to Moses. The light was coming out of the bush in the same way that it was coming out of the sand for her. But the voice said, make no comparisons. Make no comparisons. And then it said, make no judgments. Make no judgments. And then it finished with, delete your need to understand. Oh, shoot. Delete your need to understand. And then everything went back to normal. And she thought she was going crazy. But I have referred back to that for the last 40 years. Mm-hmm. Make no comparisons. We are all trained as children to make comparisons. I mean, we get grades, right? And the teacher puts it up with a star if you did special. If you didn't do special, you didn't get a star or a bluebird or whatever it was. If you were having a spelling bee, who is the best speller in the room? Who's the fastest runner on the playground? Who's the who's the smartest in the class? Who's the prettiest? You know? So we grew up, and if you're like most people, you're going to start comparing yourself to all the other people, you know. If she's the prettiest, then where do I rank in all of this? If he's the fastest runner or the best, strongest kid in the class, he can lift all this stuff, then where do I fit in? You know, how do I compare? We learn to make comparisons all the time. And even if we try to stay clear of it, other people around us are making comparisons. That is not a healthy thing to be doing, because we're all unique. How do you compare apples and oranges and bananas and strawberries and say, oh, the strawberries are the best? Well, the best strawberries out of strawberries, or is, you can't compare apples and oranges and bananas and strawberries to each other and say, this one's the best. You can say, I like strawberries the best. That's very honest. But our society tends to want to compare and come to a conclusion. Now, what happens if we make that comparison and we don't come off too good? If we're down near the bottom, like whenever they pick people for the ball kickball, I was the second to the last to get picked every time. I grew up with a sense of I'm not a sports person. Right. Which I still have that sense. I'm not a sports person. Although I like to walk, I like to hike, Now, the smart thing to do in all of this would be that when somebody wins the spelling bee, to say, yes, she or he won the spelling bee. I am so happy for them. If someone wins the beauty contest, oh, yes, she is so pretty. I am so happy for her. What does that do? That rejoicing, that joining in the exultation of the experience of winning the contest puts you in the vibration of success. It puts you in the frequency of exaltation, of happiness. And that is where we all need to be to attract more of that. In the Course in Miracles, it says the universe justifies your feelings. So if you're rejoicing and exultant that somebody won, then you are bringing into yourself things that will make you feel exalted again and again and again. But what do most people do?
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
You just rang
I can go home now, huh?
You just rang a bell, Chris.
What most people do is that they turn inward and they feel, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. And we've seen people that turn inward, they shut their light down. They don't want to be seen. They walk kind of like this into a room. They sit slouched. They just don't want to be seen, and they're hiding their light under a bushel when they do that. Because remember what Ernest Holmes, there is a light and a life at the center of all things and a consciousness that responds. So when we think we're not good enough, we're hiding our light under a bushel. Now, some people choose to wear a mask of success, right? I have my act together. I got it all good here. I'm successful. That whole dress for success, fake it till you make it. It's big in the business world. Drive the right car, live in the right neighborhood, get the biggest house, show that you're in with the cool kids in the high school. But that's a mask if you're not being yourself fully and truly when you're doing anything. If you've got your own style, I have people that tell me, Chris, your pants are too baggy. And when somebody said that to me, it was about 6 years ago. Now, 6 years ago, I was in my 60s. I was teaching kids with hormones. There was nowhere I was going to wear tights to school. I just wasn't, that wasn't appropriate. So my clothes had somewhat baggy pants, but I have my own style. You all know that. You only have to follow fashion until you develop a style of your own. And then you just be yourself. You don't have to worry about a Gucci bag or the right tennis shoes or whatever. So that mask of perfection leads to a great deal of loneliness, because if we're not being who we truly are, then the people that are relating, the person that other people are relating to isn't us. And that feels very lonely. Marilyn Monroe is a good example of that. I saw a movie about her life, and there was one scene that was very telling. She talks to this young man. There's a bunch of people that suddenly realize she's there, and she says to him, "Should I be her? Should I be Marilyn?" And then she turns around, "Hi," and does that Marilyn shtick. People were relating to somebody that didn't exist, except in imagination. And she was extremely lonely. There might be a time when we were in a relationship that where we got hurt somehow. You know, they didn't love us as much as we thought they did, or something went wrong, and we just felt like, oh, love is scary. And then what do? We put on emotional armor. I'm gonna get back in the world, but I'm gonna make sure that I don't get hurt again. I'm gonna make sure that nobody gets to me.
Mhm. 2 layers.
I'm gonna be safe when I go out there. I'm not gonna let myself be vulnerable at all. Right? And pretty soon, you got so many emotional layers, you know, can't even zip it up here. Okay, now I'm ready to love again.
Uh-huh.
No, it doesn't work that way. If we have to be this bundled up to love, we've completely locked ourselves off from the very thing we're wanting. We've locked ourselves off from ourselves. We've locked ourselves off from joy. We've locked ourselves off from intimacy, because this will never let you be intimate. This just won't. It's too dangerous to be intimate when you feel like that. We don't need that. We don't need any of that. Armor is heavy, and it keeps us separated. We may feel like it's protecting us, but it's only dividing us. The protection is being out there fully us. When we judge ourselves as not being good enough, we assume that other people won't love us if they really get to know who we are. They think, people that feel that way believe that we have to be perfect to be lovable. The irony of that is most people don't really like perfect people. And the reason they don't like perfect people is because they can't relate to them. We're so busy judging our innards by other people's outsides that we don't feel like we can let our inside show, because they got their act together and I don't, right? So how could I ever relate to that person? And this happens to the best of us. Brene Brown was saying that you all know Brene Brown, she's the one that specializes in shame and vulnerability, and discussing the importance of allowing ourselves to be who we are with all our faults. Perceived, the word is perceived faults. And she said she was doing a photo shoot, and then she saw the pictures and they looked pretty good. And she says, who am I being photo shoot? I'm not a fashion model. I'm not beautiful. What am I doing having a fashion shoot? And then she caught herself, of course, and used it for the next lecture. But I mean, even people like that who have a big name and great success and are attractive, she's an attractive woman in my mind, can have thoughts like that.
Sure.
But we're afraid to let everybody know that we can have thoughts like that. Never judge your insides by other people's outsides, because most of the time the outside is the best picture they can put forward so that everyone will love them when we really relate better to honesty and genuine, the authentic person that Brad was talking about last week. In all of the choices that I've just described, we stop showing up in life and our inner splendor stays imprisoned. And we don't want that. Brene says that when we numb our pain, we also numb our joy, our love, our creativity, our gratitude, and happiness. It's one whole thing. We got to allow all of it. Like the prophet that I read a couple of weeks ago, joy and sorrow, two sides of the same coin. We can't have one without the other and know what it really means. We may fear vulnerability, and yet without vulnerability, we cannot be creative. Embracing our vulnerability, accepting ourselves as completely as possible is a strength. It's a strength. And you know, people that want to say, what will people think? Did you ever have your parents say, don't go out dressed like that? What will the neighbors say? I mean, we've all heard it. If we haven't had it in our own lives, we've heard somebody else say it. We've heard it on the TV. What would they think if I did that? And the thing is, who cares? Who cares? Stop trying to win over anybody. Those closest to you are worth far more than strangers. And this anonymous they, what will they think? It doesn't really matter. What we're really looking for in that case is, I want you to validate me. So I want to be as acceptable as possible, and then you tell me how good I look or how whatever, right? What a good job I did. Seeking validation is denying that inner splendor. It's denying that inner splendor. I used to have terrible stage fright when it came to singing. I didn't with teaching. Okay. Whenever I was teaching, I was focused on what I needed to say, what I wanted to get across. But when I was singing, my focus was on how am I performing, right? How well am I doing? Am I holding the key? Am I going off key? Am I selling this song? And when I finally got to that point that I could listen to it and say, I like that, my stage fright went away. As long as I didn't believe in myself, I was afraid that nobody else would. And then I was just terrified until they said, hey, that was good. You did a really good job. Whew, I got through one more day. When I liked it, I went, okay, I hope you do too. I'm really here to entertain or inspire. But as far as the rest of it, I like it. Yeah. So we are going right back then to this first thing about that inner splendor. We do not want to orphan all the parts of us that we don't think or live up to society's expectations. What we want to do is find our uniqueness, find what gives us joy, find what gives us a sense of empowerment, and go there, and we will attract the people that appreciate that. When we are being most fully ourselves, we are attracting people that appreciate that. And we're not trying to live up to anyone else's expectations. And we find it's not a struggle anymore, that people love us for who we are and not who we're trying to be. I feel like I'm speaking to the choir on that one. We all want a sense of belonging. And when the people studied the people who seemed to be successful and well-liked, popular, they discovered that these people believed that what made them vulnerable was also what made them beautiful. So we must be comfortable with ourselves and any perceived failures, but most of all, we need to be comfortable with our own greatness. And we won't find that when we're trying to live up to expectations. We'll find that when we go within and express what gives us joy, what makes us unique, what allows us to feel that energy flowing through. Then and only then is that inner splendor allowed to be expressed and the glory of the new dawn. It is this understanding that will allow us to show up authentically and genuine, and remember that life begins at the edge of our comfort zone. Life begins at the edge of our comfort zone. Life is an ongoing, ever-changing expression of being. Ever-changing expression of being. So if we find ourselves living the same life every day of the week, we are hiding. So I would like to end with a quote from Michael Beckwith. And I really love the way he puts this. When we come into a degree of harmony, peace, love, and a deep feeling tone of all our needs are met, we are remembering our future. We are remembering that which we are at a higher level, a meta level, our true higher self. We are remembering what we are becoming. Isn't that lovely?
Love that. Thank you so much, Chris.